Again, good to see you here again. This is IT on Demand. Welcome to another video in this series of Python fundamentals. So what we are doing is we're exploring Python from ground up in the most basic way that I think you can get out there. So let's get started today. The previous video I talked about, of course, during I solved the exercises that I earlier gave, and today I'm still going to give another exercise, and just to let you know ahead of time. But what I want to cover today is, if you listen to that video, I talked about naming variables, and in one of the videos I had mentioned that I talked about variables as a place for you. It's a placeholder for values. So you want to store certain values, and you have to put those values in a variable so that you can later use them or reference them in your code. And so what are these? I mean, we've talked about variables, and just in case you haven't followed along up till this point, I would refer you to previous videos. Just take a look at the playlist and watch those videos from the beginning. So recall that we started looking at this program, and we talked about the item, for instance, which of course is a variable name. And what item does is that it takes an input from the user, and what you see inside this parentheses is what the user sees. So if you've used an ATM before, you see that when you get to the ATM, the system prompts you to maybe insert your card, and once you've inserted your card, it prompts you for a password, and you enter the password. So you can think of this more like that prompt that you get from an ATM. So once that is done, the input is collected. The user has typed in the input. That input gets saved into this variable called item. I won't go into the nitty-gritty of how this is represented in the system, but just know that we want to call item somewhere. We want to reference this later. We want to reference item later. If we don't need to, we don't need to create a variable for that purpose. So what I want to talk about in this video is, how do you name your variables? How did I come up with these names? Are there rules for naming variables? Can I just have any name? I mean, how did I come up with all these things? So let me just give you a few rules for naming variables. Naming variables in Python. So the very first rule I will talk about is that you can start your variable names with an underscore or a letter. So the only thing you can start your variable names with is either you start with a letter or you start with an underscore. So if you do something like this, say underscore my variable, this is absolutely correct in Python. Of course, say we want to initialize that to something, or we want to assign that variable to something. Ignore what this is just the linter telling me that I should rename this variable, and we'll talk about that later. But just bear in mind that the only things that begin the variable names are underscores and letter. So this is valid, and this is as well valid. So as you can see, I have underscore in between. I have underscore starting here. So just to take out that squiggly, the red one, I can do something like this. And I'm pretty much sure that it's asking me to do something like this because that is not a rule in this case, but more like a convention. You think of it like this is an acceptable way of naming a Python variable, and we'll talk about that later. But just take note of this. You can only start your variable names in Python using characters or letters actually, or underscore. And now that I'm done telling you about that, let's go to the next one. You cannot start, and I think I should list them here. One, start with a letter or an underscore. All right. So the other one is that you cannot, and it's not even you should not, it's actually you cannot start with a number. And let me just prove that to you. So if for instance I have maybe we are collecting two different inputs and you just want to say second number, and you type second number or say second number. This is not correct. And let me just do the same thing here so that you know. I have assigned this value 1 to this variable, but this variable name is not correct. It's not correct in Python, and definitely most other languages as well. So if you look at this, it tells me that I have an error here, and it tells me end of statement expected, but there's an error here, as you can see, as opposed to what we have here. So in fact, I think maybe it's better for me to still continue to use my variable so that you don't get confused. So to underscore my underscore variable, as you can see in this case, there was no problem with it, but now we have a problem because we have 2 in front of this place. If I take out that 2, as you can see now, the only thing I have is this squiggly, which is just to tell me that I already have this name assigned before. And if I hover over that yellow squiggly there, you can see that it's just telling me that I have redeclared this variable, which I have already defined above without any usage. So that's just what it's telling me, but this is an invalid. So let me just say here that invalid. So let's move over to the next one. The next one is that it can only be alphanumeric, and by alphanumeric we mean A to Z, whether it's the uppercase or the lowercase. A, so let me say something like can only be alphanumeric. So it could be, so you think of it from A to Z, or A to Z, or underscore. So these are the only things, 0 to 9 actually, 0 to 9 as well. So it's not like we cannot use, and I will just show you this now. So it's not like we cannot use numbers or digits at all. It's just that we can't start with digits. So take for instance, I have that my underscore variable. I can say my variable 2, and this is absolutely valid. And let me just say equal to 1. And as you can see, it tells me that there's no problem with this. And that's because now it's possible, it can only be alphanumeric, right? And this is valid. And I'm going to write another one. So you think of something like my variable underscore and underscore 2. So if you do this, this is invalid, and you can tell why it is invalid. This is invalid, and you can tell why it is invalid because we have a special character in between. So the only characters that you can use are this, and this one cannot begin the variable name. Let's go to the next one. The next one is that it is case sensitive. It is case sensitive. Sensitive. I hope I got that spelling correctly. And what this means is that my variable is not the same. It's not the same as my. It's not the same as my variable. And what does this mean? I mean, if you look at this, yeah. So let me type this out here, and my underscore variable equal to 1. So this, and let me just have this like this. So this here, where we have M, but if you notice, this is uppercase Y. The variable we had here was this one right here, was a lowercase v, a lowercase y, and this is an uppercase y. And so both of them are not the same thing. So this is not the same thing as this. They are two different things, right? So you can't, for instance, declare your variable this way and then you use it this way. That's not possible. And that's just what it means by case sensitive. So you think of case sensitive as though if you use uppercase, know that it's different from using lowercase. And that's just essentially what it means. So uppercases are not the same as lower cases. In some other programming languages, this is not true. So whichever way you define the variable, as long as it's the same name. So in some languages, you have this and this to be the same thing. But in Python, it is not so. Let's look at perhaps the last one, is that it must not be a Python keyword. And what do we mean by a Python keyword? So when you think of keyword, think of keywords. Keywords are actually reserved words. Are reserved words in Python that have special meaning. They have special meaning and they do special things. They do certain things. So you can think of, so they do certain things. Certain things in Python, certain things. All right. So think of this more like keywords are just special words that have special meaning to Python. For instance, if you want to define a function in Python, you use def to define a function. We'll come to that point. For now, just take note. We want to define a function in Python, we use def. And so if you now want to assign a value to a variable, you cannot use def. You can't say something like def equal to 1. It's going to yell at you. And the reason is because def is a keyword. It's a Python keyword. And so this right here would be invalid. This is going to be invalid. And so these here are the basic rules that I can think of on the top of my head for now, except if while working I see that there are other variable name rules that I think you should know about, but these are the obvious ones that I think I can talk you through. The other thing, and this is just an advice, is that when you want to name your variable, you should avoid using L and avoid using a single O. So say for instance you want to assign assign a value for instance to L. It's not advisable for you to do this, or O as well. And the reason is not far-fetched from the fact that just reading through your code, you can hardly figure out if this is L or this is I, and that makes it difficult, right? Because someone else might, even you might look through your code and you think, oh, okay, was that L or was that I? You get confused. The same thing happens here, is that you are not so sure. Is this O or is this, is this 0? Is this O? It becomes a little bit confusing. But I would say if you want to use L at all, then use the uppercase L, because that's still something that is a little bit easy to figure out. And I would also say not to use the uppercase O, because this also is confusing. So if you want to use O for any reason, you should use the lowercase, because it becomes obvious that this is a lowercase O. So I think those are just two things I think I wanted to talk about. In the next video, I will talk about certain other things you should consider when naming variables, and see you in that one. Bye for now.